Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of this podcast. First of all, it's not going to be Cranky Tales any longer. We renamed it. Now it's called Crankcast. And second, the format changes a little bit. So basically, instead of just mindlessly rambling, this is going to be a weekly podcast with a proper structure. So in the first part, we're going to take some news from this week related to motorcycles, obviously. And then in the second part, we are actually going to take a little story. Now, it can be a racing story, a story about a specific bike, about how something happened in the motorcycle industry. It doesn't matter what exactly it's going to be, but it is going to be motorcycle related, and that's most important. So, that being said, let's quickly cycle through this week's topics. So, we're going to have 5 news. So, the first one is going to be the Dakar Rally. That's not actually happening in Dakar. But yeah, the Dakar Rally has just started. Second one is actually Honda news, because they released the new Goldwing, which is really similar to the old Goldwing. Also Honda, they officially announced that the CRF300L and the 300L Rally are going to be coming to the United States. Now, I'm not from the United States, but if you are from the US, I think, having a new bike is always a good thing. And finally, you have 2 more. So first of all, Baja or Bajaj. I'm not exactly sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, but I'm going to call it Baja. Baja is officially the highest valued motorcycle manufacturer in the world, as Jeremy Clarkson would put it. And number 5 is Kawasaki relaunches basically a dead brand at this point. The Meguro brand. You probably never heard about it, but we're going to talk about it on this one. And finally, for the story time, we're going to take a look at KTM in MotoGP. We're going to take a look at their progress, what they have done, why are they so unique, and why I love them so much, and why my veins bleed orange, basically. And why I get hard on every time I hear the word KTM. But yeah, let's go. Let's get into the serious stuff first. So let's tackle news first. The Dakar Rally is on. So it started, at the time of this recording, it started about 3 or 4 days ago. So today should be the end of the fourth stage. And they had a pretty interesting start. So basically, the first and the third stage were pretty regular. I'm not going to call them easy because nothing in the Dakar Rally is easy. But I'm going to call them more usual, regular, if you want to say it that way. But yeah, we have that. But the second day was absolutely brutal. It was brutal because, they had some sand dunes. And you might say that, of course they had sand dunes. They're in Saudi Arabia. And you might be right. But they had some really deep sand dunes, basically pretty close to the beginning. And what this meant is that a lot of riders were into quite a bit of trouble. And I'm not just talking about more sort of unexperienced riders, because you can't call anyone there a beginner. Nobody that goes to Dakar really is a beginner. But even, for example, Toby Price, which was the motorcycle leader after the first stage, had some pretty big issues with those dunes, and that allowed for other people to cover a lot of ground. And basically now Toby Price isn't the first one. So currently, the battle is really between anyone, like KTM, Honda, Husqvarna, Yamaha, and I probably left some other manufacturers out. There isn't a clear winner so far, and to be fair, this is one of the greatest parts about the Dakar Rally. You never know who's going to win. You could have a half an hour lead in the last stage and crash or even get lost. And you can lose hours on end on something like this. So the Dakar Rally, the winner after the winner actually crossed the finish line. You never know it before. And that's, I think, one of the most exciting stuff. And one of the most unique things about this rally. But yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen these following days, or following week and a half, basically. I've been following the Dakar since I was little, and yeah, I'm really excited. I hope KTM will win. Go KTM! I'm a bit of a fanboy, what can I say? But yeah, made the best win, made the best rider, the best bike win. Yeah, this has been the Dakar Rally. Now for the second news, going to stuff that more normal people could experience. We're going to be talking about Honda and the new Honda Goldwing, which is basically the same as the old Honda Goldwing. Yay! Okay, in all seriousness though, so Honda did issue an update for 2021 for the Goldwing, and it's basically an update regarding their rear storage. Now, it's not the most exciting part, but it is what it is. Not really, just Honda basically released this update to the Tour model. So the Tour sort of pack, the Tour model wasn't optional. So if you're getting a standard Goldwing, you will not have these upgrades, but basically it's just better luggage in the back. That's mostly it. Other than that, it's still the same bike. It's the same good bike. I mean, the Goldwing is a really fierce competitor to the BMW, the K1600, I think GT or GTL. I'm not exactly sure, but whatever. Yeah, they have some contestants over there, but Honda is doing things properly in that segment. And their DCT Goldwing is actually, I think, a fairly good idea. So that's gonna be interesting. But yeah, this has been Honda. But going to more sort of exciting Honda news, because there are more somehow exciting Honda news. I know exciting and Honda rarely go well together, but yeah, this is gonna be the case. So Honda officially announced that they are gonna be bringing the CRF300L and the CRF300L Rally to the United States. Now, these bikes have been announced a few weeks ago at this point, so they're not news necessarily. But the news part about them is the fact that they are bringing them to the US, because apparently we weren't sure about this before. So, but let's talk about the 300L on the 300L Rally, because I think this come into a segment at the right time, because the dual sports segment has started to see a bit of a resurrection lately. A lot more manufacturers going to this dual sport adventure lightweight market. And Honda is basically doing the same. And Honda has tried to do the same with their old 450L, I think. Yeah, the old 450L was a pretty darn good bike. But these two basically come at the point in the market that they don't have much competition. The biggest player by far so far in the 250 dual sport market was the Yamaha Wr250r. That was a great bike. It was a bike that was acclaimed by a lot of people, a lot of reviewers, a lot of YouTubers. Everyone had good stuff to say about it. But Yamaha just officially announced that they would discontinue the Wr250, mostly because of emissions reasons, I would assume, and they don't want to invest the money into a new model. But the point is that this leaves a huge gap in the market for a really proper, reliable 250 dual sport. And this is where Honda comes in, because they're 300, 250, potato, it's the same thing really, I don't care. But this bike looks up where basically just takes the place that the WR250 had, and now we have the CRF300, which I'm excited. I'm excited to see how this is going to do. Now, I do have some two concerns, I guess, or issues. First of them is, are they still going to be slow-ass dogs? Now, look, these are basically upgrades to the old CRF250L platforms, and one of the issues with that, it was slow. Like for dual sport, going on the highway for it, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you can technically do it, but with a 250 buzzing at I don't know how many RPM next to your head, it wasn't a pleasant experience, and they were a bit lacking in the power department. So, and the thing is, yes, you might say they did increase the cubic capacity, so now you should have more horsepower. But not really. I mean, you might have a few more horses, I'm not exactly sure. But not really. The reason Honda went to an almost 300 from a 250 is basically emissions. In order to comply with the latest Euro, I think it's Euro 5 now, emissions, you have to do something about your engine, right? And so in order to keep the same horsepower level as the old 250, they had to increase the cubic capacity of the new engine to about 300, and now they should be about on par with the old bike, but compliant with emissions. I mean, what can you do? I'm afraid these are still going to be a bit slow, and especially the rally version, because the rally version is just a heavier version of the dual sport, which, of course, as you might imagine, doesn't really help much. Now, another slight concern, or I mean, not a concern, but an observation. Previously, the rally version was basically the dual sport with some fairings. I mean, it might have had some small differences, like I think a bit better fuel mileage. I think because they had more fuel. But yeah, not much. It was mainly the fairings that I found it was heavier. What I would have loved to see Honda, but I don't think it's gonna be the case, is make it actually better for rally. So give it more proper suspension, give it better suspension, give it maybe higher of an engine. Maybe even give it a stronger rear subframe or the rear section. Because the issue with dual sports in general is that the rear section isn't that strong, and then you can't add a lot of luggage to it. Now, in a body like a rally bike, that could slightly change because some sort of bigger luggage wouldn't look that out of place on them. Now, I don't think Honda would do that. I honestly just think that the rally is a bit more fuel and some fancy fairings, and that's it. And even now, when you look at the price, I might be proved right. Because the CRF300L starts, the base model starts at $5,249, and the rally version starts at $5,999, so basically $6,000. With a bit of a caveat, in these packages, ABS is not by default. So if you want ABS, you're going to have to pay probably a few $100 extra. The price, I think, is good. Now, if you think about it, you can get a brand new, reliable dual sport that can act as a commuter. You can go a bit off-road at $5,300. That's not bad. I would argue that's definitely not bad. But given this price, I'm really curious to see if the rally version will be worth it. I mean, get a bit extra in wind protection, maybe a bit of extra fuel. I'm not sure about this one, though. But yeah, I hope it would be worth it. And I think Honda will have great success with this, especially now that the Wr250 is not in the market any longer. But yeah, we're going to have to wait and see how it does in this market. In other markets, definitely going to do well because there are a lot of markets, like Asian markets, for example, or Brazilian markets, where lower CC motorcycles are a thing because they are people's main ways of transportation. But in places like Europe or the US, it's not quite the same. And that's why in the US, for example, lower capacity motorcycles don't usually catch on that well. But yeah, we've banged around on this topic a bit too much. I really hope Honda is going to nail it out of the park with this one, but we're going to have to see the reviews. I would love to test drive one. I'm not sure if I would ride one, if I would buy myself one, but yeah, who knows. Either way, going into our fourth news topic, it's about a company called Baja, or Bajaj. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. I'm going to pronounce it Baja for now. I'm probably wrong, sorry. But you have probably never heard about this company. But you should have, because they are the most valuable motorcycle manufacturer in the world, as Jeremy Clarkson would put it. Seriously though, this is a manufacturer that has been really popular in markets like India, for example. They are an Indian manufacturer. But you have definitely seen Baja motorcycles, and quite a lot of them on the streets, because Baja owns 47.97% of KTM. Now that changes stuff, because what this means is that Baja basically built all the lower CC motorcycles, the street motorcycles of KTM. So the Duke and RC 200 and 390s, the 390 Adventure, the Husqvarna even, 401 Vitpilen and Svartpilen. But all of these bikes have been built by Baja, even their 125s have been built by this Indian company. And you know what? Lower CC motorcycles sell a lot more volume than higher cubic capacity motorcycles. And this is accentuated by the fact that Baja has entered the Thai market with great success. They've been selling like hotcakes over there. Of course, in India, they've been selling like hotcakes, of course. But then now they're also planning to enter the Brazilian market, which both of these markets might not sound that rich, I guess. But you have to realize that these are markets and are places where motorcycles a lot of times are more than just toys. They are people's main means of transportation in a lot of cases. And so being the one who sells a lot of these, you can notice how you make a lot of money. And speaking of a lot of money, they are worth $13.6 billion US dollars. Now, if you compare this to other corporations like car corporations or tech corporations, it might not sound like much. But you have to realize that motorcycling still is a niche in general. And 13 or almost $14 billion evaluation is not something to scoff on. It's actually, I would say it's actually quite darn good. And you have to realize that these bikes are actually decent quality, right? It's not like when you buy a Baja, you buy I don't know, a $1,000 Chinese kit motorcycle you buy on Amazon. It's not. I mean, sure, you can argue that KTM, for example, with their 390s and with those bikes have had their fair share of issues. But if you take the grand scheme of things, overall, it's actually not bad. It's not bad at all. Like, their quality is actually fairly decent. I would call it fairly decent. But now moving on to something a bit western to India. We're going back to Japan again because Kawasaki revitalizes their Meguro brand. Now, I know what you're saying. You have never heard about this brand, and truth be told, neither have I. But basically, Meguro has been a brand in the old days, in the days of sort of classic motorcycles. And they have been owned by Kawasaki, and that brand died. And now Kawasaki introduced a new bike under this Meguro brand. So it's not going to be a Kawasaki, it's actually going to be a Meguro K3. K3 being the model. Now, before getting excited about this, know that you will most likely not be able to get one, at least not in the beginning, because for now at least, the Meguro brand is going to be Japan only. Now, it's a bit disappointing, but I can see why them having these experiments and taking these risks would be safer to do Japan only. But let's take a bit of a look at this bike because it's still interesting. And I think that if this Meguro brand is going to do well in Japan, I don't see a reason why Kawasaki wouldn't bring it on in places like Europe or the US. So what this bike is a modern retro roadster. Now this Kawasaki is basically tapping into a market that they haven't had much success in, but it's a market that's been booming. And this is the modern vintage bikes. Market that's been defined by bikes like the BMW R90, Yamaha XSR, the 700 and 900. There are probably Triumph with their Scrambler, with the Bonneville. There are a lot of bikes in this sort of modern retro scene, and this is what Kawasaki is trying to tap into, and I think they're doing it smartly. Because having a separate brand that's sort of dedicated to these retro tribute motorcycles, I honestly don't think it's a bad idea. And I actually think they can definitely take this brand to really nice places because it's easier to build a valuable brand based only on one niche, that being retro motorcycles, than to take an existing brand, Kawasaki, which even makes jet skis, and make that one to be, yes, that's the default classic modern motorcycle that you want. So I think they're taking an interesting approach. What I think is also interesting, and I don't quite like that much, is the price tag. Now, we all know that at least the retro modern bikes usually come at a price, and the Kawasaki Meguro is no different. This bike starts at $12,400 US, which in my opinion is quite pricey. If you take a look at bikes in general, $12,400, it's not in the premium section, right? It's not Super Duke money. It's not Tuono money. It's not Superbike money. Definitely not. But neither is it MT-07 money. And the issue I have with this is that the base of this bike is the W800 platform, the Kawasaki W800, which is basically an almost 800cc parallel twin engine producing anywhere between 48 and 52 horsepower. That's not amazing. Now, I'll give you that. I mean, look, 50 horsepower is enough for a bike. And I'll give you that a lot of people that go into these sort of vintage motorcycles, they don't care that much about performance, they more care about the styling and the looks. And truth be told, this bike looks really good. And I'm not just saying it looks really good as in the lines are nice. What I'm saying is that it takes so much inspiration from the old bike. It looks almost exactly identical. Like, sure, the old bike looks a bit lower and a bit longer, but the lines are basically the same. The gas tanks looks to be exactly the same. Even the exhaust for a new bike looks really slim and has a nice slender figure. The tails, like everything on this bike looks really similar to the original Meguro bike, which is amazing because this bike, at the end of the day, it is a tribute to the old Meguro bikes. And I think the design is on point. I think they nailed it, but I think that the performance aspect will be kind of lacking. I mean, and for $12,400, I'm honestly not sure. It's harder to get me excited for a bike like this for this amount of money. It's a bit of a shame, but yeah, who knows? Maybe it's gonna sell, because if you think about it, the R9T performance-wise doesn't really cost that much. Doesn't really give you that much, but it's still a really well-sold bike. That's why BMW continued the program. So I think we're gonna need to see. I honestly hope that the Meguro brand does well, because I want to see this brand in the US and UK, in Europe. I would love to test drive one of these. And I'd love to see Kawasaki getting into this game, because I think they have the history, right? They have the bikes, they have the heritage to tap into, but Kawasaki hasn't really done that much. They tried a bit with some sort of retro-styled models, but I would argue that they weren't the biggest successes out there. And I think this Meguro brand might actually be a hit for them. I hope. I think they look really cool, and if they ride as well as they look, I think Kawasaki definitely has something going on for them. Definitely. So, this has been the news section. These 5 articles. Not the most interesting, but not the most boring either section. But it's time to go to the second part, which is the story time. And in this second part, today we're going to talk about KTM in MotoGP. Now, as I said, I kind of bleed orange. As in, I really like KTM. I really like KTM as a brand, and I love what they're doing. But I think everyone was surprised about what they have been doing with their MotoGP program. If you're not aware, KTM first entered this program about 4 years ago now. Something like that. Nothing more than that. And the thing is, when entering MotoGP, one does not simply enter MotoGP, because you can think about MotoGP sort of as Formula 1. This is where you're racing prototypes, where you have to build bikes from scratch. This is not like Superbike, where you get like factory provided Superbikes, or where basically you have a bike that's already on sale and you modify that one. No. These are prototypes. These have frames that you haven't seen in any other bike. The same goes for their engines and stuff like that. And I think MotoGP is not as hardcore engineering-wise as Formula 1, but out of the motorcycle world, it is definitely the most hardcore one. And KTM signed up for this program about 4 years ago. And they did something quite revolutionary and quite special. And I think a lot of people have been given them credit, but I honestly don't think enough people have been giving them credit, because what they achieved this year in 2020 in MotoGP is nothing short of outstanding. First of all, you have to realize that KTM's bike is the most unique bike out of the entire field. No one has a bike like them, and it doesn't resemble with anything. I mean, sure, from an aspect-wise, you could argue there are bikes that look similar. It doesn't really matter. What I'm talking about is about the internals, and this is where KTM hit it out of the park, and I think they did an amazing job. First of all, we have to talk about the frame. KTM is the only manufacturer in MotoGP that uses a steel trellis frame. Now, let me explain this a bit. So usually MotoGP had a hybrid, I guess, of aluminum and cast aluminum and carbon chassis, which work well. I mean, all manufacturers use it. And in fact, Ducati has tried this steel trellis frame before. So the steel trellis frame is basically sort of like a ladder frame. It's, instead of having like a big thing made of aluminum, you have like a structure made of steel tubes, and those basically give you the bike's rigidity and its flexibility and stuff like that. This is the main difference, right? So if you look at the trellis frame, you're going to basically see different tubes stuck together. If you look at an aluminum frame, you're going to see a cast thing, so it's one thing from one piece, basically. But yeah, Ducati has tried to do this before, and Ducati with trellis frames are really good friends, especially in the street bikes. But even they, and they have quite a bit of a racing history, even they gave up on this idea because it just didn't work. When Ducati tried to do it, it took Casey Stoner, which was their main rider at that point, quite a while to get a grip of the bike. And to be fair, he was one of the only people that could tame that thing. They had an amazing engine, but what they didn't have was the stability of the frame. And so you had to ride in a special way. And to be fair, I think only Casey Stoner got close to properly taming that bike. And here comes KTM. When at the point where nobody used trellis frames, not even Ducati used them any longer, and they said, "Oh, you know what? We're going to build trellis frames." Everyone laughed because, KTM does have a history with trellis frames. They build them in their off-road bikes, in their street bikes. The Super Duke even has a steel trellis frame. They're good at that. They know what they're doing in that department. But really, this idea has been tried before in MotoGP, and other teams have failed. But KTM nailed it, and nailed it out of the park. They are, I think, the only team that managed, the modern team, that managed to make a steel trellis frame in a MotoGP bike that actually works, that people can actually ride. You can see that they ride because all of the riders did well this season. So, this is the frame, right? Completely different. Next up, you have the engine. They didn't borrow of an engine from anyone. They didn't go to Yamaha. They didn't go to whatever to get an engine. No, they built it from scratch. So, in the MotoGP field, you usually have two types of engines. You have inline fours. Usually, some of the Japanese go with that. Then you have V4s. Like Aprilia does that, Ducati does that. And KTM went the V4 route, and they came out with, first of all, with one of the best performing engines out there. KTM's bikes, even they're just 4 years old, they are one of the fastest bikes in the field, and that's amazing. It is amazing because if you think about it, they haven't had that much time to evolve this engine. And they made it from scratch. They didn't get any hints from anybody. So the engine is a cool part. But then the third thing that sets them apart from basically everyone is suspension. And here, no other motorcycle manufacturer can sort of do that. So all of the riders in the MotoGP field use Öhlins suspension, front and rear. KTM owns a suspension company called WP, White Power. And so what they decided to do was, you know what, we're going to build our own MotoGP suspension. Everyone thought they would be mad. They would be crazy. You can't, Öhlins is the best. Öhlins will always be the best. But guess what? KTM developed their own suspension as well. And you know what? I think it works great. You just have to look at the results. The bikes work really well. And it's more than just individual components. It's a sum of this bike. They have control over so many things. They design their own chassis. They design their own suspension and engine. And what this allows them to do is to infinitely tweak them. And they have sort of a vertical control, right? They have control about almost anything they put on that bike. And that thing does give them an advantage. Even though they're unique in a lot of different areas, they can tweak it as much as they want. They can do it their way. And I think that is... that's something that not all manufacturers have. So yeah, this is what makes them that sets them apart. And another thing that sets them apart is how quickly did they rise through the ranks. It's only been about 4 years since they started racing in MotoGP. And you might say, well, 4 years is a lot of time. It is for a lot of things. But for putting on a winning MotoGP team, it isn't. And I think we have to appreciate the lack of time, I guess, that they had. Because if you think about it, KTM, up until now, at least, they had some excuses, right? So, for example, in MotoGP, at every start of the season, every manufacturer had a certain number of engines, a certain number of testing sessions and stuff like that available for them for that season. And if you're a new team that hasn't gathered an X amount of points, you get extra. And that's fine, right? Because it encourages new teams to get quicker up to other teams' level. But KTM managed to get out of there in 4 years. That's amazing. There are teams, even today, I think Aprilia still benefits from these sort of advantages given by MotoGP. KTM doesn't have them any longer, but I honestly don't think they need them. They have reached a place on the competitional scene that I think not many people expected them to reach. And sure, the bike itself is great. But what KTM also managed to do is to gather around a bunch of incredibly talented riders. So they had Iker Lecuona, they had Pol Espargaró, they had Brad Binder, and they also had Miguel Oliveira. And KTM managed this year to have 3 wins with 2 of their riders. So let's take 2 of them. So Miguel Oliveira actually didn't race for the factory team. He raced for Tech 3, but Tech 3 signed the contract with KTM a few years ago, and they raced with KTM bikes. And man, did that contract pay off, because Miguel Oliveira brought Tech 3 their first ever MotoGP win. That's amazing. But either way, Miguel Oliveira will actually transfer to the factory KTM team next year. And hey, he won already 2 Grand Prix. One of them, it was the Styrian Grand Prix, which he did one of the most amazing overtakes ever. Last corner, he overtook 2 people at the same time and managed to snatch the win. And then you have Portimao, which is his sort of home territory, where he smashed it. I mean, he got first in qualifying, and then you just never saw him. He started in the race and then he finished, and a while later the other guys finished as well. Now you could say that, yeah, well, that's because Marquez wasn't there and stuff, but he won at such a big difference that I don't think Marquez would have really mattered in that discussion. Maybe for second place, but yeah, Miguel Oliveira definitely was on fire this season, and he's a fairly new rider to the sport, right? He's not like Valentino Rossi came to KTM or something like that. He has had his years in the sport for sure. And the other huge surprise was Brad Binder. Brad Binder is a MotoGP rookie, so that means this is his first ever season. And what's amazing about this is that in his third ever race, MotoGP race that he raced, he won. That's huge. A rookie winning. And the way he won it was even better, because he started up, I think, about 7th, and then at the start he fell back a few positions and they started to gain positions back. Had such a good pace that basically he managed to get the win. And he actually put 5 seconds between him and second place. So what I'm trying to say with this is that KTM has some amazing talent. And the Tech 3 team next year, I think, will still go KTM. I'm not 100% sure on which riders are there. I think Iker Lecuona is still there. I'm not sure who the other one. I think it was Danilo Petrucci. I'm not sure. Whatever. But in the main factory team, we're going to have Brad Binder and Miguel Oliveira. The 2 KTM winners from this season are going to be in the same factory team. I think KTM is definitely going to be a team to look after. Especially because if you think about it, it's not just these one-off victories. I mean, you can't talk about one-off victories when you won 3 Grand Prix, but either way, it's not on a rare occasion that KTM has done this, because they have consistently been on the podium. Pol Espargaró was close to getting multiple wins, and they have been getting on the podium. And what this allowed them to do, they were 4th in the Constructors' Championship. They ranked higher than Aprilia, and Aprilia has been racing MotoGP for a long time. And what's even more amazing is that they were just 4 points behind Yamaha. That's wow. Yamaha has been in MotoGP ever since I've known myself, right? More than 20 years, a lot of time. Even with all this experience, they were only 4 points ahead of KTM. I think that says something. That has to say something, about the future of this company and of this racing program. And I'm really excited for it. But another rider that really needs to be congratulated for KTM success is Dani Pedrosa. So I think a few years ago, Dani Pedrosa actually went to KTM as a test rider. Now, Dani Pedrosa from what I know, he didn't actually win any world championship. But he did win his fair share of races. He had a lot of duels. He was definitely in the top riders, a lot of podiums, yada, yada, yada. And after he retired from racing, he went over to KTM to join as a test rider. And I think this shows, because the way the KTM team exploded this last year is amazing. And you can definitely, a lot of it has to be attributed to Danny Pedrosa's input on how the bike handled, how the bike responded to commands and stuff like that. Now, of course, a lot of the kudos has to go to the engineering team as well, to Brad Binder, Miguel Oliveira, Paulo Espargaró, and Iker Lecuona. But I think a lot of kudos has to go to that team in general. They were a great team, and the fact that they supported the tech-free team as much as they did, I think KTM gets my respect for that, for sure. They may not do everything right, but when they go into a sport, man, do they nail it. So I am definitely really excited about next season. I think KTM is going to have a cracking season with these two talents that seem unstoppable, Miguel Oliveira and Binder. I think we're going to have a really interesting next season. I think KTM is going to have even more points than last year. They're definitely onto something. And this combination of their proprietary chassis, engine, and suspension, I think it's a winner. It can definitely be a winner. The thing is, KTM has always had this sort of underdog thing, because they were good in enduro and motocross, right? But then they wanted to join supercross, and everyone laughed at them, like, haha, yeah, right, yeah, you with your stupid steel chassis. And guess what? They won with their stupid trellis steel chassis. And this is exactly the case in MotoGP. 4 years ago, everyone laughed at KTM, like, yeah, you MotoGP, what the fuck are you doing? You don't even make a superbike. Go back to your being stupid little off-road toys. And KTM has always been this underdog when they entered a new sport. But what has been consistent is that whenever they enter a new sport, they quickly get over to be competitive and sometimes even dominate that sport. And you have to realize that MotoGP isn't the first road racing endeavor that KTM has ever had. Well, not really, because they have a lot of RC390 championships. They have a Moto3 team, for example. This is where Brad Binder started. But so they have racing experience. And they race in so many different areas, and every area they tackled, they were successful in. Think about the Dakar Rally. They won I think over 15 or 17 Dakar rallies in a row. Enduro as well, hard enduro, motocross, supercross. They are so competitive in everything they're doing. It's amazing what this company is doing. And the fact that they teamed up with Red Bull, these two KTM companies, they're a powerhouse in MotoGP, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. I love the fact that they're doing it their own way. They're taking these rookies, like Brad Binder started with KTM and now ends with KTM. It's amazing. I think the fact that they start with the rookies, they properly get them through the process. The fact that they managed to build such an amazing bike in such a short amount of time, it definitely needs to be appreciated. And I think, watch my words, but for next year, definitely watch the KTM team in MotoGP. Now, that being said, we're almost 40 minutes in, and I'm kind of tired of talking at this point. Who would know? Because this is the second take I have to take, because first time I didn't really press record, so yay. But seriously though, thanks a lot for sticking through with this podcast, for listening to this. Now, wherever you listen to it, also make sure to check it out on YouTube. We have it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcasting platform of choice is. And also don't forget to check our main channel, Crank It, because if you don't know about it, Crank It is basically a channel with motorcycle films. Yeah, that's all I can really say. I'm going to have new videos over there, and I'm going to try, and I'm definitely going to hold myself accountable to this one. I'm going to try to make this a weekly podcast where we're going to talk about different stuff, interesting stuff, I think, from the industry, and just overall have a good time. So that being said, thanks a lot again for listening or watching to this audio show, and see you next week. Talk to you. Bye.